My name is Daniel Lutaaya. I'm an investigative journalist and also a media lecturer. In 2020, they started tagging us. For me, I was tagged as the Bobi Wine NUP journalists. Now, when Bobi Wine was arrested in Luoka, so we followed Bobi Wine all the way to Nalufenya, where he was being held, and riots were happening in Kampala. But I was reporting, giving updates, live updates from Nalufenya. There are no red journalists, there are no yellow journalists. They are just journalists. If you are not trained to be a war reporter, don't report the 2026 election. My name is Daniel Lutaaya. I'm an investigative journalist and also a media lecturer. I started as a radio news anchor for Joy FM in 2013. So that's where I started. And from radio, I moved on to television with live TV. Then I moved for a short stint to another radio called Galaxy. And then WBS TV was my big break. That's when many people in Uganda started learning about me. My voice started being on a national television. And from there, I then moved to Kwese and Sanyuka, NBS, and now at News 24/7, where I'm the managing director. Journalism in Uganda it's not an easy journey to cut through the noise. I started journalism at the time where we were having the digital revolution and where information was being democratized and anybody could receive and send messages at any time. Cutting through the noise became increasingly difficult because social media was taking over. Ugandans were getting used to receiving information from various sources and not just us journalists. It was difficult on that side, but then again it helped me because I'm one of the journalists that rose up through the actual digital revolution of the late 2010s and used digital tools from the start. Digital tools didn't find me in the newsroom. I came already with Twitter knowledge, Facebook knowledge, and YouTube platforms that I used to use to share my personal videos to start sharing journalistic content. Reporting in an election in Uganda as a journalist is almost as if it's a crime, because if you report a story that is seen to favor one side, another side hates you. If you write a story that favors the other side now, this other side hates you. And it would be normal if people, because we know that all the stories that we write rub some people differently. Most, they rub different people differently. And that would be okay. It happens all over the world. But the problem is that the Ugandan politicians act on those emotions. In 2020, they started tagging us. For example, for me, I was tagged as one of the Kyagulanyi journalists, the Bobi Wine NUP journalists. That tag created a lot of problems for us in the field. You would be attacked. I remember I was in Jinja at Nalufenya when Bobi Wine was arrested in Luoka. So we followed Bobi Wine all the way to Nalufenya, where he was being held, and riots were happening in Kampala. But I was reporting, giving updates, live updates from Nalufenya. There have been trucks, tear gas trucks, and also armored trucks of Uganda police moving in and out of this place, Nalufenya police station. There is a lot of activity with police vans and pickup trucks getting in and out, ferrying police officers and army officers in and out of this place. There have also been some equipment, some sticks, tires, and lots of other equipment, things that I think police picked from the streets that have been blocked by protesters in Jinja. And a police officer, no, it was a military officer, pointed a gun at me and told me, I was recording with my phone because Chitimbo was using the camera for the videos that we shall air on the TV. And then I was recording short videos on my phone that we were relaying on Twitter. An army officer points the gun at me and says, "Ngenda kukube sasi," which means I'm going to shoot you. Put down that phone. And I was fully branded, press everywhere, but it doesn't matter. So what I've come to know is that a journalist's position is that they are an enemy of everybody, of both sides. Because even during that very election, there was a time when we were in Kazo district. Honorable Kyagulanyi was campaigning. The reception was not as good as he had gotten all over the country. And these people kept saying, we are the first district, we are the home of President Museveni, we cannot, welcome you. We don't like you in our district, so get out. And that's the story that we did. I did that story, NTV did the same story, Daily Monitor did the same story. All of us agreed that this is the actual story because it is what was bizarre. Right up to that point, there is no district where Bobi Wine had been rejected, apart from that particular district. And we put that story out. And the following day, Kyagulanyi was at a rally and said these journalists were bought, and some of them were threatened to write wrong things about what happened in Kazo. And his boys now turned against us. There is no solace for you as journalists, apart from amongst yourselves as journalists, and even the people that we think understand the law, because I wouldn't blame Kyagulanyi's boys. They didn't have any training in political science. They didn't know that it is okay for there to be dissenting voices. I wouldn't blame them because they were not very highly educated, but I would blame the police. These are people who go and study politics, political science. They study very many courses. They even have a police training school in Webaja where they go for refreshers for the commanders at DPC level. So my wonder was how the police was also behaving as if they are thugs and beating us up and tear gassing us and directly pointing guns at us. And yet they know the law that we are supposed to be there to do our job. So that is where the challenge came. To be a journalist in Uganda, first of all, you must accept that you are not going to be safe. You must have a plan B and a plan C, because the worst can happen, and I've seen it happening. Journalists have been abducted, journalists have been arrested while I'm watching, we've been shot at, my leg has been broken, crutches for over 3 months, because of journalism. So it's not a very safe environment. And it's one thing, if you are thinking of reporting about politics as a journalist in Uganda, you must be ready that there's going to be persecution, there might be prosecution, and there might actually be threats, physical threats of violence against your life, because the society and the powers that be have yet to understand that there is a role and there is a need for a camera to be there and record things for the good of the public. But also, the public needs to understand that as a journalist, I do not support a cause. I am simply there to report what is on the ground. So I do not support any cause. And I think that is the challenge that we face. Because when you are assigned to report about Kyagulanyi, you are branded by police, by the NRM as a Kyagulanyi reporter. If you are assigned to cover President Museveni, you are branded as a Museveni reporter. And that creates problems even in the society. People just need to understand that we are there. We have biases, we have people we support, we certainly vote. So that means every journalist out there has someone whose name they tick at the ballot. But we have decided, just like we hope the police and the army decide, because they also vote, we have decided as journalists to say, even if I'm not going to vote for you, I will report about you objectively. And I'll make sure that the public out there is not influenced by my own bias. So that is the next level that as a society need to understand this thing of journalism. There are no red journalists, there are no yellow journalists. They are just journalists and they support different people, but they have decided, like the police and the army who says they will treat everybody fairly without fear or favor. And they swear an oath. We have also sworn an oath that whereas I support a particular political party, I will be impartial for the sake of reporting about politics. That's one of the scariest moments of my life. Very tough. Police was shooting everywhere. Explosions were going off. There were stun grenades, tear gas, bullets. It was chaos. So I raised my hand with a microphone of NBS, just so if there is any police officer at my back who shoots me, they know, if they point their gun, at least they can see that the person raising their hand is a journalist. But that also didn't help, because there was a journalist from Busoga One Radio. He was arrested, yet he was with us with a press tag, put inside the mobile police. So it still didn't help, because we were still being brutalized, we were still being beaten. You know, we tried to put our cameras. That's the same day Ashraf Kasirye was pepper sprayed that day. Ashraf Kasirye faced 2 violent attacks that I remember while we were on the campaigns. The first one was there in Luka, where all of us were tear gassed, pepper sprayed, beaten, but Ashraf Kasirye was particularly pepper sprayed. And we kept shouting with Abubakar Lubowa and Chitimbo. He's a journalist, he had a press jacket.
journalist. He's a journalist. He's a journalist. He's a journalist. He's a journalist. You want to kill him? You want to kill him?
Now, after seeing that, when bullets started flying, I raised my hand with my microphone, just so they can see that I am a journalist. And just so in case I am actually shot, there can actually be a video that shows that I was shot while I had, because the universal symbol of surrender is raising your hand. Now, if I raise my hands up with even a press microphone, and then you shoot, I wanted that to be on the record. You know, some of the work that we do as journalists will not be appreciated in this government. It will not be appreciated even in 10 years from now, but it will be appreciated many decades later because we write it down. And people keep saying, okay, why are you recording police committing atrocities and yet nobody is going to go to jail for it? Whatever happened in Kawempe, those atrocities that people committed, it may be this government, it may be 10 years from now, it may be 20 years from now, but people will be arrested. People are still being arrested for genocide, for the genocide in Rwanda. Even now, it happened in 2025, people are still on the wanted list and they are still being arrested and prosecuted. We document things knowing that maybe the Uganda Human Rights Commission will not, like for me, for my case, the Uganda Human Rights Commission has never even written anything to me, a letter, or even asking me to come and hear my side. They will sometimes write reports and say, okay, you know, and shelve them. But there will be a government. There will be a government in Uganda that will say, okay, open up those files, dust them off, and let's prosecute people. From what we covered in the 2021 election and what is happening now, leading up to the 2021 election, there was some sort of fear from the security forces. There was fear, and so the atrocities were committed, but not in broad daylight, but also they were not blatant. They were not with impunity. The problem that I saw and identified with Kawempe, I was not there. I live in Kawempe, so I used to see the campaigns happening, but the epicenter where the brutality against journalists happened is not near my home. What I noticed with Kawempe is that the security forces are getting more brazen. They no longer fear. And that is because their commander has told them, chop off heads, beat everybody, you are safe. Before, there was at least some political posturing, you know, where the commander would come and go to parliament and say, we don't believe in beating people. We are, you know, there was some sort of posturing. I remember the times when, you know, Uganda police, the spokesperson would come out, apologize. Here, and I think it was the spokesperson of the military, Brigadier Flavia Biekwas, who came and journalists walked out from media center and she wrote an apology, apologized to journalists. You know, this current military leadership in Uganda doesn't care. They will beat you, and the chief of defense forces will go on Twitter and say, my forces, thank you very much for beating everybody, for beating these journalists. And you know, so that is creating a situation where the security forces in the field feel that they are now protected from the law. And that's very dangerous for journalists who are going to be covering this election in the field, because a police officer then in 2021 would think, okay, I will beat this Daniel Lutaaya, but I may not get away with it. I may be the scapegoat. I may be transferred. At least they used to do transfers. They send you away, they you know, at least. But right now, they know that if I beat a journalist in Kawempe, I may actually get promoted. The commander has said, let us beat, we must beat. I foresee danger for us journalists in this coming election. I don't think I still have enough energy to report a Ugandan election in this current situation. I would certainly report about a Ugandan election in maybe 2031, when, and I've said this before, even after 2021, I said, I dream of a time when I'll be able to wear my suit or my shirt and just cover an election. But an election where we have to wear bulletproof vests, ballistic helmets, is not war. I did not sign up to be a war reporter. I signed up to just be a reporter in a political election. It's supposed to be a civil exercise. where citizens are exercising their rights. They go, listen to people, and then go and drop a ballot. It is something that is supposed to be very simple. Now, the security forces of Uganda have made it very complicated. And because of that, I don't feel that this is an election. If I had the passion for being a war reporter, the kind of journalists that go to Afghanistan and report, the kind of journalists that are in Gaza, I respect their work, but I'm not a war reporter. Anybody who is a war reporter world over, and you want to cover a war situation in East Africa, come and cover the Ugandan election, 2026. That's what you're getting. It's war, it's not an election. The problem is being on the front line, because when you are on the front line, like for example, for me, I can sit at 24/7 and write stories and edit stories and put out content on YouTube and Twitter, and I may not get in trouble for that. But when I go to the field, then they have an opportunity to revenge. You get it? So they have an opportunity to revenge when you're in the field. So it's easier for you to do the reporting if you're not in the field. But for the journalists that are going to be in the field, they need special training. And the journalists that are going to report on the Ugandan election 2026 should not be trained as journalists that are going to report an election. They should get specialized war reporting training. They should train as if they're going to Gaza. That's it. The training should be training a journalist going to Gaza, because bullets will fly. They flew in 2021. It's worse. Kawempe was just a tip of the iceberg. It was just a small showcase of what can happen in the Ugandan election. And I wrote on my page and said, people in power fear elections, because in an election, anything can happen. One Uganda, small Ugandan, one like this, could even just be some guy who has just turned 18, can vote you out of an election, and all the power that you have been wielding can go. And that's what they fear. So because of that fear, politicians often say anything goes during the campaigns. Beat anybody, kill anybody, and you will apologize after the election has happened. Recently, last month, during the Kawempe election, Yasin Kauma's family was given a house by the government. During the run-up to the 2021 election, he was killed because before an election and during an election period, anything goes for politicians. They will do anything because they know that as long as they are still in power, they can apologize later. And the family took the house. Safety tip number one is, there's no story that's worth your life. I know we've said this many, many times, but there is no story worth your life. When that army officer pointed a gun at me in Jinja, I put down my phone and I stopped recording. I would have decided to continue recording, but I decided that I need to stay alive to tell this story. So you need to be alive to tell stories. There is no one going to tell your story better than yourself. The second safety tip that I can give is, you, as a journalist, you must maintain your impartiality. You must maintain your objectivity. You must be seen to report on both sides of the aisle. The third one is, you must be bold, because both sides do not like you. That's what you should know as a journalist. There is no side that likes you, because in Uganda we say obalabisa. You will show the police's brutality, and if maybe an opposition candidate is also brutal against people, against police, you have to show it. Your objectivity is your greatest protection, because at a moment, before they pick you, they used to pick, I don't know if they still do, but they used to pick journalists and take them to during the days of Kanoka Kabajenda at ISO, they would pick you and take you for questioning, and the questioning would not be very nice in ISO. So before they pick you, on the day that they pick you, one story that you did that they think is against the opposition could save you. The fourth tip is, as a journalist, you don't go into the election if you're not trained. You must be trained on how to identify risky situations. You must be trained on how to report risky situations. And the fifth one is, you must know the limit. There is always a limit. At a time when you see your colleagues are falling, they are being shot, that's the limit. To say, you know what, we have reported enough, let's move out. Do you know why you must know how to evacuate as a journalist very quickly? is because in Kawempe, I saw something that used to happen in the 2011s, where police would tell you delete the footage. So all your work can go to waste. You have braved bullets, your colleague has been shot, you're trying to capture this moment, and then it doesn't even get out there. So as a journalist, if your story doesn't get out there, you have wasted your time. So know when to pull out, save your recordings, save your pictures. So if you have taken enough videos that show the atrocities, pull out, or make sure that the SD card that you have, now I'm giving serious tips now. You must have multiple SD cards. So after recording a particular atrocity, for example, an army officer has shot someone dead, point blank, executed someone in the glare of your camera, you pull out that card because it has a very important data point. Keep that one, or give it to one of your fellow reporters to move it away from that scene, such that footage survives. So your story must survive, you must survive, and your story must survive. Otherwise, you would have done it for nothing. First, no story is worth your life. Secondly, you must be impartial, report on both sides, it will save your life. The third is make sure to have training, safety training. The fourth is know when to stop. And the fifth is your story must survive. If you have gone through a difficult situation, make sure that you have about 4 different SD cards, because they have started telling you to delete footage. So when you delete the easy footage, make sure that the actual things that you report, that you recorded, the actual atrocities, are recorded on an SD card that is in a safe space. You can actually even string them and keep moving them around. Nobody cares for journalists after the election is done. The mental health, most journalists don't have good enough health insurance to even get a mental health practitioner talk to them. I would advise, if media houses can, to bring mental health practitioners to talk to these journalists. Even to bring us to talk to them for what to expect. Because it is easier on you when you expect it. But also when you come out, there is post-traumatic stress disorder. I faced it when I came out of the election. In Uganda, people burn rubbish. Whenever I would see rubbish burning, I would freeze, even if I was driving, thinking it's tear gas. Explosions, tires bursting, those are fireworks. Those are things that right now, sometimes, of course, I've gone through lots of, I've gotten some help to get rehabilitated and not to fear so much things like fireworks. But before 2021, December 31st, when fireworks was going off, I was hiding. I was fearing. My heart was racing, you know, because it is a traumatic experience. And like I said, one of the most important things with journalists need to know, if you are not trained to be a war reporter, don't report the 2026 election. Leave it for journalists that have gotten special training in war reporting. Again, I want this to be made very clear. What we are going to report about in 2026 for the election in Uganda is not an election, it is war. So train as a journalist, train as if you're going to Gaza. The democracy in Uganda is too young. It is not a real democracy, and I've been in countries that have real democracy. I was at the University of Chicago, and people were protesting. Again, me with my post-traumatic stress disorder in Uganda, when they wrote an email and said some students are going to protest, and they were protesting against Israel and Palestine. Remember when universities all over the US? So I was in that, and I asked my professor, should I come to school today? Should I come to class? I said, no, it's just a protest. They're going to be protesting, you can come to school. I said, I come to school when there is a protest. They said, yeah, police is going to be there. I said, police is going to be there, and you want me to come? But I saw what democracy is. The police was there handing out water to protesters so that the heat does not give them problems. The ambulance was there by police, helping them, giving them first aid. And they were there protesting, saying police is bad, we don't like the American government, and nobody was touching them. They negotiated with them. They took their petition. They were there, I think, for a week while I was in Chicago. And it all happened. Now, here in Uganda, you see now I'm having this interview with the three of you. Let me just write on my Twitter and say, I am inviting 20 other journalists to come here at my own home and we protest against police brutality. And see how many forces, different forces, police, army, JAT, will be at my home in the next 20 minutes. So we don't have, what we have is not an actual democracy. It is a young democracy that we are trying to build into a real democracy. So currently, we as journalists are very key to building that democracy again by showing the atrocities and making sure that we put the government to task to do something against those that are committing these atrocities personally. And I also want to mention the government is getting better. It's getting better. The only problem is that right now there is a problem with especially the leadership of the army, that they are not sure, even the officers themselves. And I talked to some of them. They are not sure which orders to take. Should you take the orders of your commander on the ground on the day before you go to Kawempe, or should you take the tweets as your orders? They don't know what to do. It felt bad because the tweets that I put out during the election day of 2021, I was just doing journalism. And I had a hunch. I knew that there was going to be something worse than what happened in 2011. Because in 2011, social media was shut down and we used VPN to bypass and people were able to post. This time, I said to myself, and I told Chitimbo, I told him they are going to switch off the whole internet this time. Now, before the internet was shut down, I bought a lot of airtime, knowing that the only way to communicate was going to be through SMS. And I also knew that I'm going to have to SMS someone out of Uganda. So I talked to a journalist colleague of mine in Zambia, who I sent earlier on. I sent my logins for my Twitter handle and told her, I will keep sending you SMSs on your phone. And that's why I had to buy a lot of airtime, because I was sending SMSs to Zambia. So I told her, I'm going to send you SMSs and you're going to be writing, and make sure that down you put something like admin. And so when the internet was shut down, I sent the SMS and then I started. That's how I was reporting. So that's how I managed to bypass. I used the proxy outside Uganda. And then I get threatened. Big people. They threatened and told me I must take down my posts because they're making the government look bad. People are using my posts to say Chagulanyi has won. And yet the Twitter posts that I was putting out were Twitter posts about particular polling stations. And again, like I told you, our democracy is very young. So people are not learned enough to know that the results of Kamuli primary school polling station do not determine the results of the whole country. So me, I knew that, but I thought maybe Ugandans would understand, because CNN does this all the time when elections are happening. People put out results. And so the story was flipped against me. And yet I did, whatever I did in the interest of Ugandans, to make sure that there is a report reaching outside the world about what's happening. And of course, I didn't have the results of the whole election. I only had the few polling stations where I had gotten information. Results went out. People started asking me, why did you delete the tweets? And I couldn't answer, because even me myself, I was under bondage. I couldn't answer because my job was threatened. I couldn't answer. So I just kept quiet. And the story rolled on, but there is a professor who wrote a book about the Ugandan election, and he wrote the reason why my tweets were removed, but people just don't like to read. And I've also explained it. So it can happen to anybody. You can be, and I'm not the first person. NTV journalists just recently were forced to delete their footage. It's the same thing that happened to me. I wouldn't want to delete, I didn't want to delete my tweets, but I was forced to delete them. If there was a way Elon Musk could reverse my tweets from 2021 to return, I would love them to return. Because they were not, it was, again, like I said, it was basic journalism, basic impartial journalism. Because in some of the tweets I was writing, polling stations where Museveni had won, and Bobi Wine had received like 2 votes, you know? And that was one of the tweets. But the problem is, people get scared. Again, like I said, people in power fear journalists for some reason. They fear us so much. They fear the information that we put out. They fear the impact we have on people. Because when I was called to delete my tweets, I told these people, some of the tweets have Museveni winning. It's just I think 2 or 3 tweets that are showing Kyagulanyi winning. A polling station in Chiruhura, I think the polling station where Museveni votes from, Bobi Wine got 0 in that polling station, and I wrote it. And somehow still someone got scared in the security services there, threatened people at my workplace, and then the pressure came down to me. I was also threatened and told to delete the tweets. They were harmless tweets. I still believe that they were just harmless journalistic content, because whatever I wrote ended up is exactly what the Electoral Commission also has from those polling stations. And even then, at the bottom of all my tweets, I would put a disclaimer and say these are not the final results. The final tally will be made by the Electoral Commission. Political education is very key. The fact that, and I'm not blaming the security forces alone. The security forces come out of the Ugandan public. They are coming out of the Ugandan society. A Ugandan reaches tertiary institution, university, without knowing that it is okay for Godfrey to support NRM, and it is okay for Daniel to support DP, and it's not a problem. When we reach that point, journalists will be safe. But right now, journalists are not safe from either side, because I'm telling you, in 2021, Kyagulanyi's boys turned against us. They were planning to cut our tires, to beat us up and whatever. And we had to have a special meeting with the leadership of NUP to tell them, you know what, guys, for us, we are journalists. We must report what is there. Either side, it doesn't matter. Even if we have a change of government right now, the next government will be beating up journalists, because the society has simply not understood that politics is like football. You can support Manchester United, I can support Crystal Palace, and it is okay. Me, I support Express FC. There are people who support KCCA or Villa. But after the game, we go and drink together and have meals. That's it. That's what politics is. But if politics is being run in Uganda as a do or die, people fight, MPs are beating up people. From the local levels, even LC elections, people are fighting tooth and nail to beat, to get into power at all costs. There is nobody that is safe, not the journalists and not the citizens of Uganda. You cannot be safe in a system where political rivals are considered enemies, warring factions. Nobody is safe. Yeah, so Ukweli Africa should train journalists on how to deal with the hostile environment, training them on how to, like the 5 things that I pointed out, but also should train journalists on how to report, peace-building reporting, how to report stories like the things that I just talked about, to tell people, because journalists can transform society. Journalism is so strong, we can transform society. If we spend 5 years before an election telling it over and over again, and telling Ugandans and telling Kenyans, telling Zimbabweans, telling all people in Africa that, you know what, elections are not a do or die. We can do this. Giving them hope. Sometimes whereas we report about atrocities and tragedies, the current situation, you can decide as a Ugandan and say, you know what, I'm not going to throw stones at anybody during the next election. When one Ugandan makes that decision, and many Ugandans follow them and stop doing and not beat up people. If we as journalists tell stories of police, you don't have to shoot people. You don't have to fire bullets. When there is peace on both sides, then people will start identifying that, you know, there is whoever wants to bring about instability is just doing it for political reasons. So, whereas there is no political education in our schools, we as journalists can do our own political education by giving people stories about hope, showing them experiences of elsewhere in the world where elections are peaceful and people go home and people lose elections and spend 5 years organizing and then they come back and win. You know, we need to tell our politicians, because our politicians come from our society. We need to teach our politicians as journalists. We don't have to do it ourselves because the Ministry of Education is not doing it. We must teach our politicians that you can lose an election and go home, organize, do something else, do your own business, and come back and win it. So you don't have to beat people. You don't have to hire goons to assault people because you want to get into political office. I think those are the stories that we can tell during the peace times. To just give people hope and show people that, you know, this thing is possible. Because we are also part and parcel of this democracy and we must build it. We're not going to build the democracy by just reporting about elections. We must report before the election, preparing for the election. The reporting preparing for the election should be reporting that is trying to calm people down, to give them hope, to show that it is possible for for a peaceful election to happen on both sides. And these police officers sit back home and watch our TVs, they read our newspapers, they listen to our radios. We have that much power. We talk to everybody. Even Museveni at one point sits down in his state house and tunes into a TV station, tunes into a radio station, or reads a newspaper. So we have power to talk to them directly, to talk to the police officers, to talk to the citizens who vote, to talk to the Electoral Commission, to talk to the President of Uganda, to talk to the leaders of political parties. We have that power. But I think Ukweli Africa can do that. Talk to them and tell them that this is possible. And it helps everybody. I think journalists need to know that hope, they should not lose hope. I'm going to use the words of Shaka Sali. We need to keep the African hope alive. It's the only way that we shall succeed. Things were not as good as they were 5 years ago. Things can get better. Things can get better, and we need to give hope as journalists. We need to give hope. We need to think in terms of constructive journalism. Good stories, if they are out there, look for them and give people hope. Even if in a situation where there is a lot of bad things happening, like we saw in Kawempe, identify a good story and tell it, because it gives people hope, and that's how we build this democracy.